Alrighty, hey everybody, Patrick here. Just thought I'd share a little quick tutorial on using trim sheets and making them. When I first got into 3D, you know, this was something that I heard about. I looked for tutorials on it. I mean, even recently I looked for some tutorials on it. I really couldn't find any information, anything that was pretty straightforward. So I hope to make this as straightforward as I possibly can. So let's get started. Maya scene here, very basic. Forgive my modeling here, and especially the texturing, which we'll go through. I'm just going to do something quick, so that you guys get the idea on how to create them. Once you do, you can, take this to whatever level you want to take it. I'm going to just do a basic interior with some crown molding, baseboard, and chair rail, and then just a little light switch. With a wall texture. It's important to note when you make trim sheets that your spacing in between these objects is rather important, especially when you start to what's it called? Bake the color ID map, which is going to end up being important here soon. So another thing you can consider is that here I'm obviously using floaters to be able to bake normals, and you can do that with pretty much anything. For instance, on the top of this plane, if you wanted to put wood planks, say you were doing the exterior of a house, you could put your wood planks here, like the siding, and then here you could place your concrete foundation, and then here you could place all your window trim. And then below that you could place any kind of damage or any kind of signage or anything you want, and ultimately bake them all onto this plane, and then use a single texture to trim the entire house with. So I know that when you're first starting out, most people would seem to model all those pieces, place them all over the exterior of the house, and although this has a tendency to look better, if you notice most video games, that's not how things are textured. They use these trim sheets to texture them because A, it saves geometry for hero assets or whatever. It optimizes the game better, and B, it's just easier to use one material to texture the entire exterior of the house rather than 20 different textures to texture that exterior of the house. So I'm obviously not going to model everything from scratch for you. So these are objects that I had already modeled in the past. I just brought them in for the purpose of this lesson. So here we're in the Maya scene. I have my 4 high poly objects, my baseboard, my crown, and my chair rail, as well as my light switch. So to note, or you should note that each one of these high polyed has a material color attached to them. And the importance of this is when we bring these into Marmoset to bake them, it's how we're going to be able to texture them specifically in Substance Painter. So when you model these things or whatever you do, it's important, you don't have to UV them, but it's important that you do place a material texture on them, a shader. Another thing to note is that I have to use Marmoset to bake these because XNormal doesn't pick up on material color. It uses vertex color. And that, for you ZBrush guys, that's what you guys have come to know. So if you would bring this piece of crown molding into ZBrush, polygroup it, and then poly paint it, then you could use XNormal to bake the color ID map. But because I don't want to do that, I'm just going to do it in Marmoset to show you how it works, and then we'll go from there. So here we have our low poly wall. I'm going to take this and I'm going to export this, either OBJ or FBX, whatever's easy for you. I'm going to do it here. Alright, and then we're going to take our light switch, our crown, and our chair rail, all these 3 here, and we're going to export this as well. And we'll do that in this whole OBJ1, export, yes. Let's do that one more time, make sure that my materials is on. Here, export selection, yes. Alright, great. So now let's jump into Marmoset. Nope. Here, you kind of see an idea of what I had done here. No, we won't save changes. Alright. So let's import our objects here, we're going to import home 1, which is our high poly of our switch, our chair rail, our crown molding, and our baseboard. And then we're also going to import our low poly wall. So remember, we're not using this to bake normals, we're just using this to bake our color ID map. We'll use Substance Painter to do the normals, ambient occlusion, and the rest of the stuff. That way we can still procedurally texture each individual high poly asset. So let's bring in the baker and marmoset. Drag hole 1 into high, drag plane wall into low. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Marmoset's baker, but you know, it took me a little bit to get the hang of it, but it's actually quite intuitive. It's pretty amazing. So let's go to the baker. Let's make an output here. Let's go to let's do this. Let's create a new folder that way. Go here. We're gonna make it a JPEG image, and we're gonna call this our color ID map. All right. We're going to change that to 4096 by 4096, and we're going to uncheck that, and we're going to check material ID. We're also going to go into the low poly part, and we're going to estimate the offset of the cage. This is because if you're using floaters like I did, you know, these aren't part of another plane. They're actually floating off the geometry. So, I mean, I do this, it always seems to bake the normals better, and I mean, bake the color ID better. So, so that's what we're gonna do. We're there. All right, let's go to the baker and let's bake it. All righty. So now let's remove the high polys and let's just take a look and see how this looks. Perfect, perfect. I have this line up here. That error is actually from more than likely a piece hanging off here. And you know what? I don't know what that error is from, but hey, it's all right. We'll work with it. So here we have our color ID map, and we will now take this color ID into Substance Painter. All right, so let's jump into Substance. Alrighty, we're here in Substance Painter. I've already baked the normals, ambient occlusion, ID, which I obviously did in Marmoset. You saw that before. And here I am now, and I'm ready to start texturing. So what I'm going to do is you know, the problem arises: how do I procedurally texture individual elements of this specific you know, model if I only have one texture set? Now, conventionally, you would assign multiple materials to each of these objects and texture them individually, and then you would end up having 1, 2, 3, 4 texture sets. And it's different with this. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a folder. We're going to right click on the folder, and we're going to add with mask with color selection. We're going to pick our color, and we'll pick this top color here. Don't worry, it blurs out for a second. Don't worry about it. So here now, we're going to add a layer. We're going to add that to our folder. We're going to pick this Wedgwood, and here we go. So now we have this, you know, this specific part of the model is actually picked out, and it's actually pretty cool because if you think about it, we have this now. I'm just going to bring this down a little bit. Sorry, talking while I'm working. We have this way to now procedurally affect this material here, and the way that we do that is, you know, you do that with each individual piece of the model. So here, if we go here and we have this piece, now we would, you know, go to maybe color, height, and roughness. We bring the roughness up, we bring the height down a little bit, and then, you know, we just maybe pick this Wedgwood and then kind of lighten up a little bit. Add a black mask, add a generator, add a ledge wear. Here you go. Now I've only added this specific detail to the part of the model that I wish to affect. So that's how you're gonna go through and texture each individual piece. I'm not going to do that. I don't think I need to. I think you guys understand what Substance Painter does. But once you get that under your belt, and remember, you don't have to use what I'm using, these baseboards and all this other kind of stuff. Like I said, you could have wood planks at the top, and you could basically combine them all as one object, apply a material to them, and then procedurally texture them all at the same time, adding the detail that you want to detail. And then when we jump into mine, which we're going to do now, I'll show you how to really utilize these trim sheets. So I've had this hidden here, and here's this same plane that I used, duplicated, and obviously you see that it's cut up. Now the really interesting thing about this is I have a texture applied to this, and I did that through the Hypershade, through an Arnold standard surface. But whatever 3D program you use, you can obviously apply your textures, because when you're done in Substance Painter, you know, you're gonna bake out these textures, and you're gonna have a single texture, diffuse, all, you know, the normal textures, and you're gonna use those textures and you're gonna apply them in your 3D program so you can visualize where you're placing the UVs. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So here we have this, right? Let's pull up the UV editor, and we're gonna look at this. Here I have my texture applied, and this is exactly how it was baked in Substance Painter. But the really interesting thing is that these UV shells, or all these cuts that I've placed in this, right? I've moved them around to be able to ultimately adjust where I want these pieces to be. If you remember the original texture, and it's here in Substance, they're all at the bottom. But here in this object, now that I have some at the top, some in the middle, some at the bottom, I have my little outlet here and my little light switch here, and all this is done with a single texture. And as you see, I've cut these pieces out and placed them over the areas in which I want them to show. And obviously you see this one hanging out down here. That's because you can, this is a tileable texture. It runs and runs and runs and runs. So you can take a UV and line it up right next to the other one, and have it go from the 0 to 1, and from the, I have mine in the -1 to the -2 space, but it doesn't matter. You can have it run this way or this way or this way. It just doesn't matter. And that way you can, you know, use this piece to texture any part of the model. For instance, say I didn't really want this this piece up here. I wanted this to actually be just wall, no crown molding. I move this up here, move this over here, and there you have it. Now I have my light switch, my chair rail, my baseboard, and wall. And this is perfect, and I'll show you why. Let's export this out to, what am I doing? Export this out to Marmoset. New panel UV2. No materials. Export selection. Cool. Let's jump into Marmoset. Let's delete this whole crazy thing. Let's take this in here. Let's go to, it's in Tut. UV2. Here's our wall. Let's apply our default material here. And let's jump into our, again, textures. Let's take our base, put in albedo, our metallic, put it in our metallic, our normal, put it in our normal, and our roughness, and put it in our roughness. And there you have it. A wall with no crown anymore, with our chair rail, with our baseboard, with a little electrical socket and a light switch. But say, you know what? I don't really like where that light switch is. I wish the light switch was over here. Very simple. Jump back to your piece here, right? And you say, okay, I don't want the light switch over there. I want the light switch right here, right? I think it's just better. It's, you know, just fine. Ooh. Let's do this. Let's take our grid snapping for a second. Make that a little bit smaller. Right? I'll take this edge here, edge, and we'll cut them. Take this UV shell, move it over. Take this one here, we'll move it over to the wall. Take this UV shell, Bring it over here. Focus on it. Let's scale it down. Move it over. Scale it up a little. Scale it up a little. A little more. I like that. Object 1. Let's export this as new panel UV3. Export. Cool. Now let's take this new panel UV3 and move it over here. And there you have it. Simple way that, you know, tiling textures work, or I shouldn't say tiling textures, I'm sorry, trim sheets work. They allow you pretty much the versatility to be able to texture whole areas with a single texture. And obviously, I hope that in watching this, it can you can use your imagination and see what you could create with this, especially if you load your trim sheets up with really detailed objects, really detailed floaters. It would help texture a whole area very, very quickly. I just thank you for your time.